Well, I hope I'm recording the right thing. So there is a possibility. You all know this, that I mess up with the discussion forum design. So I'm making the first discussion posting. Okay, so chances are I may have to make it the reply posting and the quiz due on next Tuesday night. So it's possible. Okay, if we didn't, and I'll just do it. Okay, the class, and I'll let everybody know. Okay. Of course, if you want to do it, finish early, that's fine with me. Okay. Traditionally, socialization chapter usually takes 2 weeks. And I don't know what happened to my mind. I made it 1 week, but it's okay. We may extend a little bit on it. So first of all, the concept of socialization mainly is about learning. And what you learn, the values, norms, and skills of a society. For what purpose? To be able to function in it. And it's a lifelong process. There's no end. You can say there's a beginning when you're born, but there's barely any end. In fact, if you think in terms of epigenetics, probably even when you are already in your mother's womb, the socialization already began, right? So anyway, now, and we look at the socialization concept, how it is used. Probably the biggest, one of the biggest context under which we study socialization is the nature versus nurture debate I talked about last time. Okay. And what I did not talk a little bit about, and I think it is important, it's mentioned in the textbook about human nature issue. It's kind of philosophical, but it's important. It's the foundation of sociology, right? So I'm going to just use a few more slides here. I've already uploaded into the, updated this into your D2L slides. So socialization is about learning. So what's the opposite of socialization? First of all, it's biological determinism. Okay. Everything is born with. There's not much you can do about it. Okay. And the second way to think about the opposite of socialization is discuss your textbook, but I did not discuss in the class. It's called unsocialized. If you read traditional sociology textbooks, okay, including this one, okay, they tend to introduce a lot of feral children's stories. Anybody know what I'm talking about? So children are supposed to be brought up at the early stages without much human contact. Let's say you're brought up by a wolf or brought up whatever, you know the stories. There's a lot of feral children's stories. Traditional sociology people use that a lot. Especially, I don't know, I mean, we don't have time to go through this. There's a 17 to 50 minutes video on this. I don't know, anybody familiar with a particular case? The story of a girl called Jeannie in California, 1970s. Okay, your book mentioned it. Okay, it's a typical case supposed to be feral children's story, where the child in 1970s was pretty much locked up in her family without much human contact. Her father or grandfather, I don't remember, but basically forbid people to interact with her. She's pretty much tied up to a party chair at the attic of the house. For how long, if my memory serves me right, about 16 to 17 years. Okay. And during the whole process, there's barely any social interaction, and the only interaction she get probably is the parents or family members shouting or just making animal noises at her. Okay, so I think it's one day the mother, who was half blind, probably dependent on her husband, and then one day I think somehow the argument, she went to the social service agency, and that's when people found out. They rescued a child whose name is Jeannie. I think she's still alive, honestly. That for many psychologists, it was supposed to be the perfect case of feral children, where children were brought up without socialization, without any human contact, how the person will look like or result to be like. Okay. And the typical situation people talk about is, for example, if you look at the mirror, can she still went by the age of 13, 15, when she was rescued, she can barely make any, she cannot speak. And they were able to teach her a few words. She learned some vocabulary words, but she did not know how to use them. Okay, because we all know it's not simply a word you use, but how do you construct sentences? How do you say things in the proper context? She barely ever learned that, as far as I know. So it looks like learning has a particular critical period. After that critical period, it's pretty much gone. It'll be very difficult to bring it back. And she barely have any barely have any social skills. That's from what I know. Okay, and so barely recognize herself, the self concept. Okay. Now, there's quite a few stories of those. I mean, throughout history, okay, feral children stories. I don't like to talk much about it, and I think most psychologists these days don't use it a lot. A lot of the story are anecdotal. Okay, that's first of all, it's not systematic scientific study. Secondly, frankly, the kids at the very beginning tend to be quite severely abused. Okay, and also it's possible, let's say the parents may abuse the child at the beginning. The child may show some symptoms already, let's say autism, whatever. Okay, and then the parents may begin to treat them badly. So in the sense, if the children without socialization seem to exhibit some behaviors that we think it's so bad, we don't know exactly it's because of nature or nurture. Just so far, we don't know because is it because they were born this way or because the parents really treat them too badly? It's very difficult to scientifically study. And that's the reason why I don't bring it up much, okay, in this as a way to illustrate the importance of socialization. But I just want to let you know, but it's possible to think of the opposite of socialization as biological determinism, or somebody is just totally asocialized, unsocialized. Okay. However, make sure you understand this. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to show this in the exam or not, but oh, it does work. Okay. So, but I read a cross sign in here. The opposite of socialization is not antisocial, because antisocial usually means you disregard the rights of others and you violate social norms. That actually, when you join a criminal gang, the criminal gang can socialize you into that, right? Just make sure you learn to that. So antisocial can be learned. So that's not the opposite of socialization. Okay. Socialization simply means you learn things. You can learn to be good, you can learn to be bad, you can either way, right? So that's the first. I want to make sure everybody understand what's the opposite of socialization. Okay. The second thing is I want to mention is the socialization. In most textbooks, we talk about the agents of socialization. So who socialize us? For most of us, I put some discussion posting, I think, in your this week's discussion posting site. But my general knowledge is most people don't read my postings, which is fine. Okay. But the socialization, when people think about it in everyday language, people tend to only think about parents, or at most two family members and your schools. Okay, but everybody know involves not only family and friends, but also peers, right? Influence and media influence and workplace influence and politics, religion, all of that influence our lives. Okay, so it's much larger than simply immediate circles. I guarantee you, if I ask you to give examples of socialization, people immediately think about parents, which is profound for sure. Okay, but there's way more things to socialize you than that. Okay, when I moved from China to US, I learned, the US was socializing me. Right, basically, it's not simply China, right? But so I don't know if I mentioned this before. Back when I was in China, this is traditional values that I tend to think being modest. Modesty is a good, trait that people should have. Okay, but when I came to US, I began to realize not always so. For example, every year at the end, when you write your own self-review for the boss to see, you don't want to write too much of your weakness. You want to write your strength. And if your weakness, you usually say places I can further improve, right? So that's really put it. Okay. And the thing that really teach me a lot once is I wrote a paper in my graduate school, and my professor really liked it. Really liked it, gave me an A. And I wrote back to the professor, actually just joking, but partially says, actually, I'm not even sure I know what I'm talking about. Okay. And my professor wrote me back something it's just deep in my mind, inked in my mind. Okay. He says, Colin, never say that. When I say I don't know what I'm talking about, other people will pick you apart anyway. So you don't say things bad about you. It's their job to pick you apart. Okay. The point I'm trying to say is, I think I mentioned this before. We live in a consumer society, a marketplace. The way what parents brought us up, I think I mentioned this before. Honestly, we are each a commercial product. You learn to advertise yourself, market yourself, so people will hire you, so you can sell to other people, right? You don't advertise your weakness. You advertise your strength. Weakness are so for other people to find it, and you try to prove you're not. Okay, that's the whole thing. That's the early, Girl Scout selling cookies. So all the skills people learn is, tuned for that purpose, right? Essentially. And I learned being modest. You don't have to be arrogant, but at least you don't being authentic. Maybe people will like you, but may not be good for your job. That's the point I'm saying. Okay. That's the point I'm saying is socialization agents is not simply parents and friends, but also the larger system you live in. Okay, has certain things they like, certain things they don't like. Okay. I don't know if you agree with me. I think in our American society, capitalist society, generally speaking, we do think introverts and extroverts are both, equally good. But I don't know if you agree with me, somehow I feel extroverts benefit more in our society than introverts. In other words, you may be equally good, but the issue is which one society rewards more, which one society punish more. Do you follow me so far? That's where the issue comes in. Anyway, also, I think the more interesting question, which, at the end of the chapter I may discuss, but you can talk about it in your discussion forum. Okay. The agents of socialization has been changing, right? A lot of changing. Family pretty much these days there's a lot of divorce. Everybody knows that. Step families, reorganized families, right? And religion-wise, I think everybody know throughout the whole world, generally speaking, there has been a secularization trend, right? Basically, people getting less religious. I know there are new religion coming up, like New Age, if you believe in UFOs. Okay, that mean that new things are coming up. I know Jehovah's Witness, for example, are recruiting more people. Okay, Mormons recruiting more people. So I'm not saying religion totally in decline, but the larger trend, I think, society getting more secular is undeniable, roughly speaking. Okay. And so that's the agents of change, right? And today we all live in a global community. Unlike your grandparents, your parents, you guys are exposed to K-pop and a lot of other cultures, right? In other words, the person who socializes you is no longer simply US. There are many other socializing. From so far. And not only that, let me say things I think it's more fundamentally challenging these days. With the rise of China these days, I don't know how long they're going to last. Okay. With the rise of China these days, I think the fundamental thing is if China become more and more economically successful, if US began to feel more and more challenges, what does that mean? China is a socialist authoritarian system. US traditionally is more democratic system. So eventually you will begin to, previously, your parents and grandparents take it for granted. Capitalism is good, socialism is bad. Increasingly, if you have a socialist country that seems to be doing just as well, then people began to question exactly what's the system they're supposed to follow. Do you follow me so far? That's serious. That should worry most Americans. Okay, that's really serious. The fundamental assumptions begin to get challenged, right? And not I say this AI, this rise of AI, everybody knows it's influencing us. Social media, I'll talk about this in the end of the chapter. Honestly, these days, we used to, if we make friends, usually friends, people who know each other face to face, right? If I really get really depressed, I want to divulge my feelings to somebody close. It's my friends. Nowadays, frankly, I may have people who face to face in front of me, I don't trust, I don't feel close, but I feel close to some online groups. You follow me so far? So I literally have what you call, I think it's called intimate strangers, where I tell them things I would never tell to anybody I know. Do you follow me so far? And I may have friends who are totally, I don't even know their name, anonymous friends. So far. So the agent socialization has changed. I'm just saying this to make sure everybody understand the weight of this issue. Okay, so how the change in socialization changing us. Okay. Another thing I just want to briefly mention as well, we talked about last time. Oh, I didn't mention this. Okay, human nature issue. Okay. Everyday language, everybody talk about this. I personally don't like this kind of talk. Okay. But people often talk about, are human born bad or are human born good? In my family discussions, the people talk about this all the time. Okay. Whenever I say, just human nature. That's, so everybody knows, so I put it in Jesus and children, the understanding of children are closer to Jesus, right? My understanding the Bible says so, it's supposed to be good, right? In other words, and I think about movies like Tarzan, again, it's people are born angelic. It's when you get into real world, society corrupts them. You follow me so far? That's the general notion. People are born good. And then you also have movies or novels like The Lord of the Flies. Everybody understand what I mean here? Yeah. Where people are born not so good. Children left alone are not angels. They kill each other on the island. Do you follow me so far? So are they good or bad? People always have these assumptions. Say you do something against human nature. From a sociological perspective, maybe a little bit extreme to say this. I feel humans are capable of doing anything, given the right context. Okay. So to say there's some part of human nature that people are not able to overcome, that encages you, I don't know whether you can think of one. I cannot think of one. As a soldier, you give me a war, I can kill brutally. But you give me a family, I can love generously. So it depends on the context. So I never find the concept of a fixed human nature as something useful for understanding human behavior. Okay. But I want to mention this to highlight the difference in sociology, where we tend to think human nature like a Play-Doh. You can shape it any way you want to. I know that's a little bit extreme. Anybody heard about B.F. Skinner, the term? Give me any baby, I can shape it any way you want to, as long as the baby is normal. Sociology, generally speaking, buy into that notion. Although, we understand the human-animal limits, but generally speaking, we tend to think humans are shapeable. Okay. Human nature argument is more they're fixed, and we don't buy it. And I personally don't find it so useful to understanding human behavior. It's too broad. Okay. Anybody have some thoughts, comments on this so far? And finally, last time I talked about, today the gap is closing, and I literally checked literature. There's a general agreement. Now, let me make sure the question is clear. I'm saying for understanding social behavior, human social behavior, we have a general agreement now, both nature and nurture. And we have a general agreement, vast majority of human social behavior, 70 to 80% are social, 10 to 20%, maybe, or 30% are biological, means are biological influence, right? That part, we agree it's both, okay? And we agree mostly social. That part for social behavior. Now, don't take me wrong. I'm not talking about biological behavior. Your eye color, technically a biological issue. There's no barely any social influence, right? So I'm talking about social behavior, okay? Both. And the way we were discussing this, I mentioned last time, just very briefly say this, we can discuss how your genetic potentials can be turned on or turned off by the environment, right? So let's say my grandparents and my parents are alcoholics. So I have a predisposition to become alcoholic, but it depends on the environment I live in. Do most people drink alcohol or not, right? If I live in China or even in a Muslim country, for example, if they do not allow you to drink alcohol, even if I have that tendency, I may not really act out, right? Because the environment didn't allow that expression to become real. So far, so environment can influence you. On the other hand, I didn't mention this. These days, understand socialization is much more complicated. I'll be honest with you. Okay. Genes can also influence social behavior. So if I'm hanging out with extroverts, how do you know it's because extroverts making me more becoming extroverts? How do you not know? Because I have genetic predisposition to be extroverts. Therefore, I choose people who are more extroverts. Do you follow me so far? It could be both ways. The same thing, I'll be honest with you, it's difficult to figure out. Let's say a woman behave feminine, right? We often think it's the socialization make the woman behave feminine, but it could also be, theoretically speaking, a woman has this natural tendency, and then they hung out with women who behave more feminine. And when your parents, for example, want to make you a tomboy, but find out they're hitting a rock, then you just cannot become a tomboy. Do you follow me so far? So socialization can be both ways. In other words, what your parents teach you hit with biology, some they can change, some they cannot change, right? And biology can shape your social behavior as well, okay? I'm making this complicated. We'll talk about the future, but I think it's important to know, okay? This is something that people tend to think about socialization, only think it's one-way street, okay, when it can be both ways, right? Now, so anybody has questions so far on this? If you don't get to the up to that's so previously we talked about socialization, mainly nature versus nurture, and how to teach children to behave, to make society orderly and stable. Okay, that was the major discussion of socialization in 1940s, 1950s. When it comes to 1960s, everybody, if you understand sociology, you should know the larger history. Since 1960s, American sociologists began to be more, if you call it liberal, left, whatever word you want to use. Basically, the way I see it is before 1960s, the key question for sociologists is how to unite people together. After 1960s, the key question for many sociologists is issue of social justice and social inequality. I think both has rights to be there, right? But basically, in other words, sociologists no longer think too much of how to bring people together. Rather, it's more thinking about who wins, who loses. Okay, the issue of fairness, justice. Okay, with that in mind, people began to dislike the concept of socialization. Many sociologists gave up on socialization concept because the concept is usually associated with the talk of how to make people behave and fit in, right? That's pretty much the socialization topic. And then later on, I would say from 1970s on, many sociologists began to realize, gee, socialization concept is still important. Although we do not use the concept to unite people together, but we may use the concept to learn how people are socialized to accept power and how people are socialized to maintain inequality. You get so far? So they bring So remember, the concept began to be used for different purpose now. Okay, and with that in mind, I want to bring up just a few concepts here. Okay, I want to mention this as I think it's very important. You learned the double consciousness concept in chapter 1. It's in W.E.B. Du Bois, right? The understanding that marginalized groups, disadvantaged groups, tend to evaluate themselves by looking at themselves through the dominant group's eye. You remember so far? Okay. To be entirely honest with you, I'm not just to be politically correct. Okay? I think the concept is actually sharper than the traditional Cooley's idea looking glass self. Why? Because first of all, double consciousness means I get my own identity from other people's feedback. They do acknowledge this, right? Self-identity. But another element to here is not everybody's feedback is equally important in shaping how I see I am. So your boss' perception of you pay a lot of attention. Your classmates' perception of you may be less important. Do you follow me so far? Okay, so in other words, they are arguing that, first of all, it is looking glass self. Who you think you are influenced by the outside forces, but more importantly, by the dominant group's forces, right? So in a sense that if you are a minority group, disadvantaged, then you tend to evaluate and judge yourself from the dominant group's eyes. In other words, you begin to actually disrespect and hate yourself. So far, okay. So it's kind of internalized racism in a sense. Right? But I think that's the concept of socialization in terms of looking glass self, but with a power element in it. Everybody follow me so far? Okay, we're discussing this. Okay. Probably the most important for this class, okay, I have extra point assignment on this. I already released it, I believe. Okay, that's still on the 14th exam day, okay, at night. Is the discussion of how socialization affect social inequality. Okay, there are two discussions in here. Make sure you understand them correctly. Okay. One guy is named Melvin Kohn. It's 1940s and 50s and 60s. Okay, basically he worked during this time. Okay, it's very, very famous. Okay, I don't know about you guys. Okay, when I think about poor kids and rich kids, kids from working class family and kids from middle class families, you usually think about working class kids are the people who make fuss and make so disorderly that make classes so difficult to control. Middle class kids, at least they know how to play the polite game, at least, okay, superficially polite, at least. Okay. However, this is what I thought it would be, but Melvin Kohn totally flipped the other way around. Melvin Kohn argues actually working class, blue collar parents tend to teach children the value of conformity, while middle class parents tend to teach children the value of self-expression and independence. In other words, it's the middle class children tend to be more assertive, express themselves. Working class children, working class parents, blue collar parents, tend to teach their children to be more obedient, to conform to society. Melvin Kohn argues it's not really your educational level directly influence the value you put into children, because you're, as a natural, as a social scientist, you ask why? Why do white collar parents tend to instill the value of self-expression, independence to their children, and the other way around? Okay, why is that the case? Melvin Kohn's argument is this, which is actually very interesting in my mind. Okay, he argues most parents, if not all parents, love their children, regardless of white collar, blue collar. Okay, but the way they love their children is this: you always want to teach your children what values you have learned, the lessons you learned in your life, that's going to be good for your children, right? That's the way I teach my child, right? That's pretty much. But the key thing is this: if you are in a working class family, in his days, mostly working in manufacturing jobs. So basically, what do you produce? When do you produce it? How much you produce? When do you go to work? when do you go to bathroom, when do you eat, when do you get off work, everything is controlled by your boss. Because so far, the more you obey your boss, the more you get your job secured and you get paid well, promotion. And naturally, the parents learn in that environment. The more I listen, the more I get higher pay. And if you love your children, it will be weird you don't teach that to your children. Just naturally, I will teach my children, listen to your teacher, right? However, if you work for a white collar jobs, it's possible. Let's say I work for Google, I work for some AI companies. Two things. First of all, your boss can tell you, okay, I want you to do this project in this month, but I don't give you exactly the time frame. Because so far, I can even encourage you to solve a problem coming up with your own concept, a project. So you have a lot more initiative, created a room for initiative, okay? And not only that, because your skill is so high, you can shop around for different employers. Therefore, you tend to bargain a lot with your boss. Okay, people who get higher pay means for them, you'll be a loser if you stay with one employer all your life. You're supposed to bargain endlessly. Okay, so their way to learn is, first of all, I have independence of my job. Secondly, the way to move forward is you bargain all the time. Okay, once you have that in mind, then you tend to bring that to your children as well. Okay, so that's the one Melvin Kohn was arguing. Essentially, I don't know if I say anything offensive, but I don't think so. I don't think it's related, but anyway, why is it showing this way? I need to make it bigger. Not now, I don't even know what now. Okay. So he's arguing it's actually parents control their own work condition that affect the way that parents teach different values to their children. So he gave a unique example, like a fisherman, for example. A fisherman is working class. The fisherman has a lot of control of their own work condition. How much I fish, when do I fish? So fishermen's children, even though it's working class, they teach their children independence and self-expression. Do you find this so far? So the issue here is not simply class and values, but mediated by parental control of their own conditions. Everybody follow here so far? Okay, so that's Melvin Kohn. Okay. The most important person. So that's a question I don't know if I have this in your quiz or the exams or not, but I'm going to skip this. Okay. The most famous study on how socialization affects inequality, coming from a professor whose name Annette Lareau, okay, in 1990s, I believe. Okay, the study probably done in late 1980s. I don't know how many are familiar with this. It's very influential in the newspaper. Okay, in mass media. Basically, she followed. She's more like a field study. Okay, she followed a whole group of parents, working class, white collar, black and white. Okay, all the parents. She followed them in the daily life. You eat with them, and you get the consent. You eat with them. Okay, when they take their children to hospitals and medical appointments, you follow them. They take detailed notes, everything, try to find out patterns. Okay. So I'll give you a larger picture. I'll get the details later. Okay. The larger picture, she argues, is consistent with Melvin Kohn, but give you more details from it. Okay. She says middle class parents tend to treat their children as a project. Okay. That's one of the reasons why today's middle class women are so stressed out, so busy. It's not simply taking care of children, but you're also very high expectation for your children as well. It's just not raising children so they survive, but you have extremely high expectation on your children. And that's why it can be extremely stressful life, okay, when you get married and have children, right? So that's, they take their children as a project. And that she call it the concerted cultivation, like a garden. You manicure the garden all the time, okay? Just basically, today, I think it's very similar to our term called helicopter parenting. Is that similar? Sort of like, okay, just basically every small move is highly orchestrated Okay, nothing left under. When they're pregnant, you play Beethoven or Mozart. Basically, you want to control every aspect to make sure that they are able to live up to their expectation. What children should be. Okay, the pecking order in America. That's one. And the other contrasting way of thinking about this, she argues, is working class tend to take a she called natural growth model. So the way I think about this is typically parents would say, let children be children. Don't take their childhood away. Okay, let them just have fun, express themselves. And she said that's a typical, more like blue collar parenting style. Okay, and so basically it's like free rein. If there's more grasses and more weeds in the whole thing, your comment is, well, it's a matter of perspective. Okay, if children write something randomly on the wall, everything, you actually say, well, that's artwork. So basically, you accept all behavior. Essentially, so far, okay. The argument is blue collar parents tend to have more natural growth model with children. The focus is on providing them with physical resources. Remember chapter 3, Alison Pugh study, right? Your children can have this in goods. My children can afford it as well, right? Focusing on, do you have the milk? Okay, do you have the right food to eat? Okay, versus the middle class parents see it as a project. Okay, now is this good or bad? Don't take me wrong. It's not necessarily good or bad. Okay, but Annette Lareau did say this. Okay, her perception is American pecking order in the larger mainstream society is ruled by middle class. So the rule of the game is middle class rule of the game. If you're working class population, when you teach your children the soft skills of the working class population, nothing intrinsically bad about it, but it may not equip you with the right soft skills to compete in the middle class measuring rod that's supposed to be used to measure everybody. Do you follow me so far? That's the basic argument. Okay. Let me just make it a little bit. So her book is titled is Unequal Childhood. It's a very good book. I mean, anybody encouraged to read. Okay. Basically, this is her original study. Okay. I want to just show you how careful she's thinking about this. Okay. It's not just random arguments. Okay. She literally looked at everything. And by the way, she noticed class is more important than race. In other words, white middle class and black middle class parenting styles share something common. So in other words, black or white doesn't make too much difference. It's rich and poor make more difference. Depends so far. Okay. So she will look at all the areas. I just want to share with you some of this. It's really drive it home. Okay. One is let me see. Organization daily life. So in one, multiple child leisure activities are orchestrated by adults. So every day, day in, day out, you can think about your own life. I can think about the way I raised my daughter. Okay, it's kind of weird in the way because I'm an immigrant, right? It's kind of interesting, but I'll show you this. Okay, basically, your child all day long not only has schools, but also after school programs, soccer games, and piano lessons, and this lesson, that lesson. Basically, if you have 3 children, imagine the parents driving you around day in, day out, day in, day out. From so far, basically you eat a lot of junk food because you don't have time to sit down, right? And that whole day is orchestrated. You from me so far? Okay. Versus the other side is children hangs out, particularly with kids. So after dinner, working class family, they tend to be the children just, riding a bicycle around everywhere in the neighborhood, hang out with people. It's very different than the middle class parenting this. Now, again, don't take me as right or wrong. It's just different kind of parenting style. Okay. The second one is language use. Okay. In the working middle class family, there's a lot of negotiation between parents and children. So the parents argue back, in other words. Okay. Many people don't feel comfortable with this. The parents literally, and basically, if you misbehave, the first thing is sit down, be quiet, wait for your father to come back. It's not that. The first thing is, why do you do so? What's the reason? Basically, you're more interested in the motivation than simply behavioral conformity. Do you follow me so far? Okay. And so the parents are a lot more engaged, okay, ask you reasons and discuss with you. Again, I don't know if I have Jewish American students here, don't get offended, but my general impression among Jewish American parenting is encouraging a great deal of independence. In other words, the parents and children argue all the time. Your family is like a debate class. You're literally bringing up little lawyers in the future because the parent and teacher keep on debating with each other. Okay, and that's the basically beginning. Imagine, honestly, put it in real life. Think about on dinner tables. What do parents do? First of all, do parents talk? How much talk there is? What do they talk about? How much vocabulary is there? Do you follow me so far? Okay, it's just nobody think about it, but day in, day out, the children are essentially groomed in different ways. You follow me so far? Okay. Now, language use. This one is reasoning, not simply directives, children contestation of adult statements, extended negotiation between parents and children. Here, it's basically sit down, be quiet, kind of just speaking directives, okay, in working class families, they argue, okay, rare for children to question or challenge adults. And general acceptance by child of directives, okay, that's my parents said, and it's almost like today, to be honest with you, I don't mean to offend anybody, but saying, well, that's the law said, end of the story. We never say, well, is the law right? Okay, the question you push forward, or just, okay, that's what they said at the end of the story, okay? And so you have two kind of interaction at home, okay? Then social connections are different. This is kind of interesting, okay? So if you are, your parents drive you to different kind of clubs, soccer games, whatever, okay? You tend to socialize with children of the similar habits, interests, and age groups. So you know how to interact with these children. However, this actually can work good for the working class family. Children hang out with heterogeneous age groupings. In other words, you may hang out with people of different age group, right? In other words, you actually develop some social skills that middle class kids don't because they always so controlled in their own, who do you interact with, extremely controlled, same age group, same habits, right? And that's the reason why they argue, actually, when you come to college, when parents receive back, middle class children often feel bored easily, while the working class kids may not feel bored easily because they always are used to coming up with creative things for themselves, okay? Because the middle class kids are highly controlled, right? And weak extended family ties, strong extended family ties. Let me give you this very simple, okay? In working class families, typical situation during summer when you have home project, for example, you will see the street in front of you have whole list of cars. Okay, so basically a lot of extended family ties, nephews, cousins, uncles, everybody shows up. Okay, well versus the middle class family, generally speaking, much fewer. Anybody understand what the difference between the difference is this? Okay, middle class family, if you think about the family resources, money. The money tend to go vertically, right? Grandparents to parents to children, going this way. Working class family, the money tend to go sideways. I'm going to go this. This is not money, but it's going sideways. So money goes sideways. In other words, because we don't have money, we literally family form a cooperative, right? Co-op. So you don't have money, I help you, but I have when you have money, you're supposed to help me. So it's very difficult for me to accumulate wealth because we're supposed to help each other. Do you get it so far? Okay. So the working class family and middle class, the family structure is different, okay, in terms of help groups. How do you accumulate wealth, right? And this one I think is extremely important is just think about this. In parent-teacher conferences, do your parents show up? Okay, who show up, right? And the issue is, frankly, teachers are never just teachers. Teachers are human beings. They know the parent sitting in front of them is a doctor or lawyer or just a manufacturing worker. Do you find this so far? Okay, they know this. And the parents know this as well. And there's a subtle negotiation, the attitude shows up. Okay. I don't know most of you, anybody want to be a teacher in the future, you will know this. Dealing with middle class parents is a headache. It's a real headache. Okay. They're demanding. I wouldn't say there's there's a difference between being a Karen, you know what I mean, right? Versus just being assertive. There's a difference between. Okay? Karen is you want something you don't deserve, but being assertive means, this is something I deserve, and I'm going to talk with you about it. Okay. I've taught for a long time. I've always admired some of the students who, let's say, don't like certain grades. They can come here, talk with me, but notice here, I don't have that skill. They're never nervous. They're not trembling. Okay? They're just very calm and extremely polite, but they get their point across very clearly. Crucial. It's lifetime training. I mean, if I conflict with you guys, my whole body shake. I cannot articulate sentences clearly, and maybe I'm being too rude. But they are just trained so well, to be honest with you, through your lifetime. You don't even feel it. It becomes part of them. So far, that's the kind of training you have. Okay. And so when they come to schools, when the teacher bring up your math homework, can the parents understand? Simply put, I mean, my daughter has her algebra question brought up to me. Let me take a look. My face is all red, because I don't remember my algebra anymore. Okay. But it's mean that when that face get red, they read it. They know. Some people just can get that situation, their face don't get red, and I get red easily. So I lost and people see this, they know this battle of wills, you lost in the sense. Okay. And these parents are often able to say they are able to advocate for their children much more. Okay. And so that's pretty much what she's saying. Okay. Now you say, okay, so what? So why should we care? Why should we care is, she argues, eventually, middle class kids tend to develop a sense of entitlement. I don't call it entitlement. I think it's a sense of power, sense of power, in the sense that this is my world. I can make it the way I want it to be. I will vote. Why? Because I've always been whatever I want. Through my efforts, I can make a change. Because you're used to that, right? In fact, middle class and rich kids, I think if they're socially active, they're more likely to be engaged in politics. Okay. Working class kids, they argue, tend to develop a sense of what? Constraint or powerlessness, including myself, honestly. The way I talk with my wife is the same way. We think what you'd say is you figure out what the rule of the game is, and you try to play that game, but you never try to challenge the rule of the game because you don't feel you have the power. Because through your whole life, you never feel you have that power. People's sense of power doesn't just come from a slogan. It comes from everyday experience, right? I never had that experience. What made you think I suddenly have the experience, right? So, and that's what will happen is two kids grow up differently, and eventually the system is built benefits some for some to fail. So she argues when people say all kids are born equal, she argues that's not right because all kids are not equal in the childhood. That's why the book is called Unequal Childhood. Everybody follow me so far? Okay. Anybody have some thoughts, comments on this so far? I feel it's strong. It's not always work. In my family, for example, I do orchestrate my child a lot, but I also teach the child value of conformity more because I come from a totalitarian system. And my values pretty much influenced by Chinese values. So it's a mixture, right? Sometimes it doesn't work always that. I'm pretty sure a lot of you write discussion postings. I've seen many students say, doesn't work with me. I'm from working class family, but I'm self-expressive. It doesn't work all the time. It's a general pattern, okay? General class pattern. And that pattern, she thinks is worrisome, essentially. Right? Anybody have thoughts, comments on this so far? That's the Lareau's very famous. Okay, talk about how socialization, how children learn subtly different skills to be able to manipulate the future world. And again, not necessarily good or bad. If I have a working class kid working in a white collar society, the white collar boss may feel the student really work hard, very polite, but doesn't seem to have the initiative, doesn't seem to be creative, doesn't seem to be able to create their own projects. So far, the understanding. But if you put people in the middle class family, like Paris Hilton, whatever they are, you put them into the working class family, your natural inclination is what a spoiled brat. You know what you mean so far? It's just it's not as you have to be in that situation to fit into that situation. So far, okay, that's what we're discussing. Okay. Yeah, this is just some examples. I'll just skip the examples. Okay. Now, very quickly, there are recent studies try to show the same thing. I mentioned this in the class last time already. Okay, so middle class family have steady incomes. Okay, and careers, and working class family tend to unpredictable income and no career line. Right, you just find a job one after another. Okay, like I'm doing now after retirement. Okay? And allowances make money with self-control and deserve. So middle class family steady income career, they give children allowances to build self-control and deservedness. You learned this before, right? Without that, you think of the working class family because money is not predictable, just come and go. Then they begin to see money as windfall. So windfall parent-child rearing. Self-control and morals are disconnected with parenting. You still teach their morals and everything, but the practice in terms of giving allowances doesn't exist because you don't have that money to give allowances all the time, right? So there's a disconnection between the two. Okay. Anybody have some? If you have comments, feel free. This is the one last thing I find so interesting. I think I probably mentioned this before. Just think about working class kids, middle class kids, who are more likely to do this in class. Okay, frequently ask questions in class, raise their hands for a long time until being called by the teacher. Don't take no for an answer. So I raise my hand, and the teacher don't pay attention and never put my hands down. Okay, the attitude, right? In a sense. Okay, occupy class time by telling personal stories. Okay, I have a story I want to tell. You get bored or whatever. I don't care. That kind of attitude. Yeah. So this one. Who are more likely to ask assignment extensions? Who are more likely to ask teachers to check the answers before they hand in? Parents say it's okay to ask questions. It's a teacher's job. I mentioned this before. The working class parents, I want my child to be respectable and responsible. My child is good for the teachers. Teachers eventually, for working class kids, for middle class parents, give in, worry they would make their life miserable. And for and teachers have to have teacher training. Otherwise, you'll be biased, frankly, because you basically yield to people who push you more. And what's more important is resources. When I teach everything, right, the time I spent for grading, for giving feedbacks, everything, that's resources you have. And what happens is the middle class kids, by asking extensions, raising their hands, all the things, they are sucking up all the resources of teachers' time. Do you follow me so far? I barely have any time for the working class kids. Have you found me so far? That's they are saying again, it's how socialization, this process, make people behave differently. Okay. Again, anyone has anything that you want to add? Nobody? If you have one, I'll stop here. Okay, I know it's too much material probably for one shot. I'll spend 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes or so to finish this. Okay. So I'll make the first discussion posting here tonight. Second discussion posting you next Tuesday night. If you feel it's disrupted too much, I will email everybody so you'll remember. Okay. And then the quiz also due next week. Take it easy. My coach. Thank you. So I feel weird. Okay, thank you.